Last month we finished the Harvestella demo, and I've been wanting to put my thoughts together on the game before it actually comes out. I originally scripted this video over a month ago, but I kept changing how I felt about certain mechanics, especially when Square started changing certain things that were a bit annoying. Before we talk about Harvestella though, I want to give you a bit of background on where exactly I'm coming from. I have a history with farming simulator type games. From back when I was a stupid kid, I used to play Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life way more than any normal person should ever play that game. I think I got to year 5 in that game. Kind of insane, and I'm sure some people have played it way more than I have. Several years later, when Rune Factory 4 Special came to the Switch, my sister introduced it to me. Given how much I proceeded to play it, this may have been a mistake. I had no idea of Rune Factory or anything back then. I'd really grown to love story-driven RPGs with battle mechanics. And here was a game that had battle mechanics, and also a farming system. The farming system in Harvest Moon, for example, was attractive to me because you can see that you're actively making progress. You can see that you're growing from one point to another, and seeing the progress that you're making has always felt very rewarding to me. During my absence of not playing farming sims, though, as I got a bit older, I played a lot of RPGs. Final Fantasy, I played a little bit of Dragon Quest. I've been told I should play Persona. I'm considering it, but maybe we'll wait until after Harvestella to actually pick that up. But you get the idea. Oh, by the way, if you guys are looking for suggestions, Summon Night Swordcraft Story on the GBA. Amazing game. I would kill for a remake of that game, by the way. Not to go on a tangent, but it's basically a story-driven RPG where no farming mechanics or anything like that, but story-driven RPG where you go through the game, you make weapons, you basically try to become a craft lord. And it's got a tournament sort of setting as well, and there's a bunch of figures that are corrupt. It's a whole big story. I recently went back and finished it. Great game. Couldn't recommend enough. But again, I would kill for a remake of that. Anyway, we've established I've got a history of RPGs. History with farming sims, and I enjoy both of these things, and I recently started doing a playthrough of Dreamlight. Although I'm pretty disappointed that Mickey Mouse hasn't whipped out his Keyblade yet and started killing the Nightmare Fallens, but anyway. So it makes sense that to me Harvestella would look like a very attractive game. But it's not that way to everyone, and if you've read articles, looked at YouTube comments, even seen some other content creators' videos on the subject, you can tell it is not popular with the masses. I think the reason that it's not super popular, and the main complaint I see listed over and over again, is the farming mechanics. There is not a lot of land you can farm in Harvestella. It's evident to me, and probably a lot of other people to play the demo through as well. The game is very heavily story-driven. The farming, well, it was marketed as a farming game a little bit, but mostly on the RPG side, the Season of Death being one of the main things. You know, all your crops apparently just wilt when the season hits, and that'll be really interesting when we actually get to play it through, as that obviously wasn't in the demo. But at least to me, it seems like the game is less focused on the farming mechanics and more focused on building a world and having this long arching story. Now this is a very small story spoiler, but I'm going to show this on screen for you, and it's really going to give you an idea of where the game is heading. I mean, just listen to the soundtrack. Now, I mentioned earlier that they are listening to community feedback and changing things that needed to be changed from the demo. One of the big things is making it so time doesn't move so rapidly when you're on the world map, and another one, and this is a big one for me, is fixing the mage class. There were these massive delays between casting spells. It was a problem, people complained about it, and now they're fixing it. So all of this says they are actively working on it, that they do care about the game. A lot of times, demos like this come out, and developers just don't listen to the feedback, they just send it anyway. And the fact they're not doing that here, that looks very good. I have no doubt they'll continue to make changes and add future patches after the game comes out. The only hope we can have is after Act 1 there aren't too many game-breaking problems. I'll show a list here of all the current hotfixes they're going to add when the game comes out. One thing I did want to mention here, and I only bring this up because it is an amazingly cool mechanic. There are times that when you're progressing through the story, such as the forest, you're going to need ladders, or you're going to need to build a bridge. And to build these things, you actually need to construct them at home and prepare it before you actually go out and, build this ladder or build this bridge so you can progress the story forward. On top of that, there are also these incredibly powerful monsters that you're told to sneak past, but if you're strong enough, you can actually battle and kill, and I don't know what they drop because I didn't kill any of them. That's pretty cool to see, too. My theory is, in the Season of Death, they've hinted that going outside is going to be incredibly dangerous. I think every single enemy is going to be empowered like this. And if they actually do that, can you imagine the feeling of dread when you go out? The immersion that you would feel from knowing that every single one of these enemies is 20 to 30 levels higher than you? It would be an inconvenience, but it would add to the story and make the Season of Death feel way more impactful. Okay, so let's talk about the voice acting. And you might say, what voice acting? Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? If you watch the 2 episodes I did on the demo, you'll notice that I was just reading the dialogue. This is something you're conditioned to do, especially if you play Rune Factory. There's not much voice acting in that game, so I didn't think much of it until I heard Dianthus speak for the first time in combat. She is the first party member that you get towards the end of Chapter 2. And did it feel strange? Like, I welcomed it, and I was happy that there was dialogue, but it just felt off. And then on the last boss in Chapter 2, it felt off again, because the 2 NPCs have a very similar speech. It sounded so eerily similar, to the point that it's probably the same voice actor. In fact, I'm fairly sure that it is. Well, this is probably intended, due to the fact that, well, they're robot people, so they're probably all supposed to sound the same. But it doesn't change the fact that it felt off. It felt like it shouldn't be like that, like it didn't fit. It was at this point though that I kinda had a moment where I realized, I wish all the NPCs had voice acting. I really do. I think the game would have benefited from having an entire cast of voice actors, instead of just having, occasional anime-style grunting, along with the occasional battle dialogue from your party companions. But, if we're being fair and making a comparison to RF5, this is how Rune Factory 5 did it too. There was a little dialogue in terms of an occasional thing being said, usually it's a generic comment, and then occasionally in story dialogue there would be something verbally said, but usually only things that are important, like Livia announcing a location or something like that, and then it'd go back to just being text-based. Of course, it's impossible to know how the voice acting actually is, but if we're to assume that all characters, even Arya for example, have proper battle voice acting, it's a huge disappointment that the game doesn't have voice acting as a whole. Since that wraps up my thoughts on the demo, there's one thing I want to leave you with, and it's the words from the developers of Harvestella that you see when you finish the demo. We hope you enjoyed the Harvestella prologue demo. In the 3rd chapter of the story, your range of activities expands and you can meet even more cool characters. Please continue to enjoy the world of Harvestella that we have so passionately created from Team Harvestella. That last line meant a lot when I read it, and the reason it meant something is because as you're playing through the demo, you're experiencing these mechanics and the way they have been put together. It's not perfect, and I'll be the first person to say that, but it's evident that they cared a lot when they were making this. And I only hope that the full game lives up to those expectations.